In this section, we're going to look at the Google Webmaster Guidelines. Now, in order to find these, just simply go into Google and type in the phrase Google Webmaster Guidelines. And as you can see, this item that comes up first here will take you to the appropriate page. So if I click on this, here we go. This is the Google Webmaster Guidelines. Now, there is a little video there which you can watch. I'll let you do that in your own time. But if we go down here, this is the important bit. There's three elements here. There's helping Google to find your pages, help Google understand your pages, and help visitors to use your pages. And then there's the quality guidelines here and the basic principles here and some specific guidelines. And it does tell you quite clearly that if you violate these guidelines, you will be either demoted in the search engine results or more likely just expelled from the index altogether, at which point you'll have to clean up your act and contact Google and ask to be reconsidered. So first of all, let's look at the quality guidelines. So as it says, these quality guidelines cover the most common forms of deceptive or manipulative behavior. Now, Google has automated processes to look for websites that basically abuse the system. And if you look here, you can also report spammy websites. So the good news is, if you're trying to get to that cherished #1 spot in Google, and there's a website in front of you and you believe they've been using spammy techniques, what you can do is click here to fill in a spam report, and Google don't guarantee they'll take action, but quite often they will, especially if it's very spammy. It's in Google's interest to have a system where good websites come up in the search engine results, not ones that are simply being promoted by spammy techniques that don't offer a good user experience. So as you can see, if you look at the quality guidelines, there's some basic principles. It says, make pages primarily for users, not for search engines. Google would say that. In reality, if you want to be rated highly within the Google search engine results, you have to think both of your users and Google, but more on that later. Definitely don't try and deceive your users. For instance, don't try and hide a lot of keywords that are totally irrelevant to your website in order to get more traffic. Google will find that out quite easily. So it's, as it says, avoid tricks intended to improve your search engine ranking. A good rule of thumb is whether you'd feel comfortable explaining what you've done to a website that competes with you or to a Google employee. Another useful test is to say, does this help my users? Also, would I do this if search engines didn't exist? Well, again, Google would say that. Google have almost come to the stage where they almost disapprove of SEO. If you don't do SEO, then the chances of your website being found are not so great, to be honest. That said, as we'll see in a later chapter, Google do actually produce a little booklet on how to do SEO. So there's a kind of two-way split in Google in some ways. On the one hand, they tell you really not to do SEO, just make good sites and you get rewarded. On the other hand, they actually produce a free booklet on how to do SEO, albeit very basic. The other basic principle is think about what makes your website unique, valuable, or engaging. Make your website stand out from others in your field. That's the sort of thing you really want to concentrate on these days. Don't just have another website just like everyone else's. Try and make it better than everyone else's. More content, more interesting, more everything. There are some specific guidelines here, and you need to make sure you don't do these. If you do, you're going to get hammered. So don't use automatically generated content. Believe it or not, there is software out there that will just spew out content for you. So you type in some phrases and rubbish in, rubbish out, basically. So don't use these sort of things because Google will find them and you'll get deleted. Do not participate in link schemes. Back in the day, you could do this and it was kind of okay. These days, if you get an email saying, hey, we'll sell you, for instance, 1,000 links for $200 or something stupid like that. If you sign up for one of those, chances are they'll take your money and never actually do it. If you're lucky, if you're really unlucky, they'll actually give you 1,000 duff links. Google will identify these quite easily as bought-in links, and probably you will get banned from Google. Don't create pages with little or no original content. Obviously, don't just cut and paste material from other websites, but also if you've got multiple websites, don't cut and paste between websites that you own. Always write original content rather than just cutting and pasting. There are other things called cloaking. If you've never heard of that, don't worry about it. But if you are a web designer and you understand what cloaking involves, don't do it, because Google knows all about cloaking these days. Same with what's called sneaky redirects. You don't want to use things like that. Hidden text or links, again, another bad idea. It might have worked 15 years ago. So for instance, even now I see it occasionally. People think they're being clever by hiding, say, white text on white background at the bottom of the page, and they just have loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of keywords, as text at the bottom of the page, hidden away. But Google looks at that kind of stuff. Easy to identify. Don't do it. Don't use doorway pages. Doorway pages are basically pages designed to attract the search engines and then in turn lead to other more interesting parts of your website. You should have ordinary pages, not doorway pages. Everything should be integrated. And again, doorway pages might have worked 5-10 years ago, but just don't use them these days. Scraped content is basically just content that you've scraped from the internet and copied, basically. Don't use that. Google is very down on what it calls duplicate content. So I have no idea how this works, but it knows that if you've got content that was borrowed, for want of a better word, from somewhere else, it's very good at identifying that. So just don't do it. Be very careful of affiliate programs, especially if they add sort of little or no value, and they're just sort of dodgy ways of making money. So I would personally avoid them like the plague. Don't load pages with irrelevant keywords. Notice it doesn't say keywords, it says irrelevant keywords. So if, for instance, you're offering one service and then you put loads and loads of keywords in about something completely different that happens to be popular just with the aim of getting some traffic, then again, Google will notice this and you could be banned. If you create pages that have some sort of malicious behavior, like installing viruses or Trojans or malware or whatever, again, Google will detect this and you will get banned. Don't abuse what's called the rich snippets markup. More on that later. If you've never heard of it, don't worry, because you won't be using it. If you do use rich snippets, use them with caution. Don't overuse. Do not send automated queries to Google. You can buy software that will allow you to test your rankings within search engines. There's one called, I think it's called Web Position Gold, which I don't know if it still is, but it used to be specifically mentioned by Google because it pissed them off so much. And basically with that particular program and other similar programs, you would just put in a list of keywords and you would press the red button and it would go off and search all the search engines, and then it would come back with data about how well your particular keywords is showing up in all the different search engines. Google doesn't like this. It starts chewing out their bandwidth, especially if you use hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of queries. And also you find that it probably just doesn't work anymore, because if you do a couple of queries in quick succession in Google these days, I don't know if you ever noticed, but it comes up with one of those prove you're not a robot type screens. And obviously if it's an automated query, that kind of stops it dead. So most of them don't work anymore anyway. So those are things it definitely doesn't like, so avoid those. You should monitor your site for hacked content. If you're not sure how to do this, you'll see later how to use things like the Google